Hello out there. As many of you might know, my name is Viktor Wolfe. Probably don't recognize me without my sunglasses and my suit doing Gangnam style. But anyway, what I'm going to do today is read one of my short stories titled Provoked, which along with 20 other short stories will be included in a one-book volume titled Dark Days, Darker Nights. And that book will be released in the fall of 2014. But before I get into the story, you, the listener, should be made aware of the type of fiction I write, which is very hard to describe, even for me. So I'll just let the listener/reader decide for themselves. But I will say this: if you are easily offended by my work, then perhaps my style of writing is not for you. I hold nothing back, as you'll soon discover. Hope you enjoy. Side note, if you do enjoy this story and others that I have written, then perhaps you would qualify for the label as sick bastard. Just saying. Present company included. Well, I got my shirt here. It says "We Never Sleep," and you can see Stephen King wearing the same thing on the back of his hardback cover of Insomnia. I got my little guardian angel here. He'll be with me. It looks like he's reading one of my books. That's what I like to think anyway. I got my Decepticon hat on, which reminds me of a Family Guy episode. Season 7, Episode 7. At the very end, Megatron stands up and says, "Do as I command!" It's very funny. You just had to be there. Well, are you ready? I surely hope so. Here we go. Like I said, the title of this story is Provoked, and here we go. "Stop," Becky muttered to her new boyfriend Justin, who was precariously rubbing her crotch through her jean shorts. But as soon as the word left her mouth, Justin's tongue poked direly into her mouth, and then his other hand slid up the smoothness of her leg. Becky liked the attention, kind of. But what she didn't like was the fact that they were sitting on her parents' couch under a blue blanket watching a Disney movie. At any moment, one of her parents could walk through the door and catch them, sinning. That's what Becky's parents would call it. Her father Sam had been a preacher for the past 10 years, and her mother Ruth had been a devout Christian woman her entire life. And together, they both believed that 99% of the world had lost its faith in God. Becky was 2 weeks from turning 18. It was only until recently that her parents allowed her to date, and if she chose to do so, they said her relationship would be under very strict rules. That very night, she envisioned herself smooching with all the hot guys in her senior class, but the one person she had her eye on was a particular cute guy at church, Justin. She had first noticed Justin in the pew behind her, and before she knew it, he was asking to sit next to her. Becky was not a strikingly gorgeous young lady by any means, average at best, and she was apt to wonder why such a nice-looking guy like Justin would take an interest in her. Maybe it was her interest in church. She had read that church-going guys like to find their mates in houses of God. Whatever the reason, she wasn't going to argue. Before the start of worship the following Sunday, Becky and Justin had agreed to call each other boyfriend and girlfriend. To hear Becky describe it, it was a match made in heaven. But of course, Sam and Ruth were against it. Sam could read people like a book, and he told his daughter that despite what Justin may say, he was not saved. "But he's working on it," Becky proclaimed to the two of them. "Daddy's the best preacher in the world. He'll come around." She put her hands together. "Please? He's so cute and he's so nice." And it was that simple plea that convinced her parents to ride with Justin just a bit longer. That decision would turn out to be a huge mistake. As the new couple ventured into their second week together, she got to know him a little better, finding that he was sexually driven, always trying to get to second base, and maybe even still third base. Kissing was fine, if they found a private moment when Becky's parents and her little brother Paul were out of the room. But Justin's sexual predominance stuck out as a major concern. Sure, he was 2 years older and raging with hormones, but she thought it was a little much. He was always trying to touch her in places that she was uncomfortable with. "Have you ever been with anybody?" Becky asked, her face lined with precociousness. Justin's face twisted with embarrassment. He measured her evenly, leaning back on the couch and blowing out air. "Never mind," she said. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have asked you that." "It's perfectly okay," he said. "You should know things like this, and the answer is no." Becky's round eyes were solemn, struck by the answer she wasn't prepared to hear. "So, you're a virgin?" Justin nodded slowly. "Through and through," he said, sighing. "I was always embarrassed by the fact, because everyone else has done it. But now that I'm with you, I can actually tell the truth and not be embarrassed by it." Becky smiled, slipping her hand into his. "That's really good to know," she said, extremely proud of the fact that she found a handsome man who was a virgin. Before she knew it, Justin was rubbing her stomach, and every so often his fingers would trail downward, just a little further than before. This time they went inside the waistband of her shorts, and then her panties. The very tips of his fingers grazed her pubic hair. "Okay, that's enough," she said, putting his hand in his own lap. Justin threw his hands up with berated hostility, staring at Becky with severe frustration. "Now what is it?" "I told you not to go that far." "Why can't you understand how wonderful it feels?" he asked, a line of frustration forming in the center of his forehead. "Why can't you at least let me try it?" "Because I'm a Christian," said Becky, pursing her lips, "and Christians don't do that kind of stuff." Justin's face reddened, with his eyes glowing circles of fury. "Fuck Christians," he spat through clenched teeth. "Hope they all fucking burn in hell." Now it was Becky's face that reddened. Her eyes glazed over, trying to fight back the tears. "Why must you cuss like that?" she sniffled. "You know I hate it, and you know if my parents hear you're gone, and probably forever." Justin's face softened at the sight of Becky's tears. He wrapped his arms around her, shaking his head. "Jeez, I don't know why I'm such an idiot," he said. "If you'll forgive me, I'll promise never to do it again." Becky wiped her eyes. "Just this once, I'll forgive you." "You're the best," he said. "But seriously, why won't you let me stick my finger in you?" He wasn't going to quit. "Because I'm not a slut like all the other girls you know," she answered. "Besides, if it's just sex you want, then maybe you should find someone else." That should rile him up a bit. Justin closed his eyes and hummed. After a moment he said, "Because I don't want anyone else. I've given it some considerable thought, and you're the only one I want to be with." This relationship thing was a brand spanking new to Becky. She didn't know what to believe. She wanted to believe him, but it sounded like a lie to her, if she only knew. "Don't you worry about us," he whispered in her ear. "We're going to be all right. I can be patient. We'll take it as slow as you want. After all, we have the rest of our lives, right?" His smile was tantalizing. When Justin left for the evening, Becky waved goodbye, wondering if he was right. Would they be all right, despite the heavy odds stacked against them? She most certainly thought they would, once her father convinced him to see the light and the wondrous grace of God. When Justin's taillights winked out over the hill, Becky raced to her bedroom, knelt down beside her bed, and prayed for her boyfriend's salvation. A few days later, Becky found herself back underneath the blue blanket with Justin's arms wrapped protectively around her. Justin yawned, then slipped his hand under the blanket, resting it on top of Becky's crotch. "Here we go again." Becky smiled at him, then leaned over and gave him a light kiss on the mouth. "What's that look like?" he asked, tapping his fingers against her. Becky measured him uncertainly. "What's what look like?" "Trimmed or completely shaved?" he asked. Becky's cheeks flushed red. She was almost certain he had touched the hair there the last time they were on the couch. She shrugged. "Guess you'll just have to wonder." "Come on, tell me," Justin urged. "I need to know so I can fantasize." Becky's face scrunched with disgust. "That's sick," she replied. "What is?" said Justin, remnants of his anger returning. "Jerking off?" Becky nodded, then pushed his hand away. "That's gross." "Oh my God," he exclaimed, frustration coursing through him. "It's no different than fingering yourself. If you just try it, I think you'll understand." Becky gave him a revolting stare. "No thanks." "You know what?" he said. "You're nothing but a goddamn cock tease." Becky slapped him. It was an action she didn't have to think about, but now the repercussions were racing through her mind. Justin forced himself upon her, his hand imploring through the leg holes of her shorts, his fingers digging at the cotton of her panties. Becky squirmed. "Stop it," she ordered. "What do you think you're doing?" But Justin kept going, his fingers scraping the skin of her inner thighs. Finally, they broke the barrier of her panties and then her labia, and now one of his fingers was inside her. At first there was shock. Then she felt a pleasurable sensation overcome her. She stopped struggling and wrapped her hands around the pulsing muscles of her boyfriend's forearm. She looked around the room toward the open doorway, then shot Justin a reformed look. "You shouldn't be doing that," she whispered, "especially when my parents are in the other room. Just tell me it feels good and I'll quit." She couldn't bring herself to say anything because she didn't want him to quit. She closed her eyes and grinded her pelvis to the rhythm of his movement. "You're so wet," he said. Her breasts were shallow and her heart raced. What was happening? She never experienced this kind of feeling before, this kind of excitement, this kind of dirty excitement. It was new and forbidding. Though she loved the feeling, she couldn't take it anymore. She grabbed Justin's hand with the both of hers and forcibly removed it from her crotch. She took a moment to catch her breath. When she finally looked over at Justin, his finger was in his mouth. You taste so good." Before, she would have slapped him again for being so pig-headed, but now things were different. There was an ecstasy building somewhere inside her. She felt things for Justin she's never felt before. But maybe that had something to do with the fact that he was her first boyfriend, her first kiss, her first sexual touch, her first everything. "His finger was inside you," her mind exclaimed. "What's going to be next? His thingamajig?" Just then, a completely foreign part of her brain formed a completely foreign thought. "His dick, okay? He wants to put his dick inside you. He wants to come all over your virgin lips." She simply couldn't believe her mind had formed those nasty words. What was happening to her? She didn't know, but she couldn't wait until they were able to experiment again. "Yes," she thought, "I want to feel his big dick inside me, and I want it now." Justin put his forehead to hers. "Let's go somewhere where we can have some fun. What do you say?" "I say I want your dick. I want it in my mouth. I want it inside me." The notion of going off somewhere with him made perfect sense. But on the other hand, she couldn't. She just couldn't bring herself to betray her parents' trust in her. If she did, then this relationship would be over. She had to protect it. Justin didn't know her parents. He didn't know how serious they took things like this. "I can't," she said, resigned. Justin threw up his hands. "Jesus H. Christ, woman," he bellowed. You're almost 18 years old and you still choose to put up with all this baby-fight shit. I just don't understand you." Becky tried to silence him, but it was too late. Ruth rounded the corner, cautiously looking toward her daughter and then to Justin. "Is anything wrong, Becky?" she asked, her eyebrows raised. "Do I need to send Justin home?" Ruth was a round-figured woman who wore glasses that made her eyes seem smaller than they were, and who wore a hairstyle that dated back to the 80s. Paul came into the room, curiously looking on. He was a hefty, sharp-faced kid whose 8-year-old curiosity seemed to always get him into trouble with his ultra-Christian parents. "No, Mom," said Becky, "everything is fine." "Doesn't sound fine," she said, prying. Sam finally stepped into the room, his eyes spying Justin. "I don't know about you, Justin, but I think it's time you and I had a little chat. What do you say?" He held out his arm toward the back door. Justin said nothing, shifting his eyes at Becky, then back to Sam. "Sounds good to me." The two of them went out the door into the summer heat and settled onto a swing that was situated by the corner of the house. Becky raced to the back bathroom, then carefully and quietly raised the window where she could hear her father and boyfriend. Sam gazed out at the country setting of fields and hills before him. "It's just beautiful out here, isn't it?" Justin nodded. "So tell me, Justin," said Sam, "what is it exactly that you want with my daughter?" "We're just dating," he said. Just trying to find out if we're right for each other." "That's kind of what I was trying to get at, Justin. It was only recently that her mother and I have allowed her to date. We told her she could choose anyone she wanted, with one stipulation. That relationship would be constantly monitored by us. Does that make you angry?" "You want me to be honest?" Sam nodded. "Absolutely. That's why we're out here." "It upsets me," Justin admitted. "I can't see why she can't go to the movies or out to dinner or something." Sam smiled. "It's got nothing to do with you, Justin. These rules would apply for whoever Becky was dating." Justin shrugged. "But I can't really call it dating," he said. "How about we just call it our overprotectiveness of our only daughter," Sam offered. "Let me ask you a question. What would you say is your most prized possession?" "That's easy," said Justin. "My car." He gazed over at the cherry-red Firebird sitting in the driveway, glinting brightly in the sun. Sam nodded. That is a very nice car. So I assume that you wouldn't want me to take it out and wrap it around a tree. Justin shook his head. Of course not. So guess what my most prized possession is, said Sam. Justin shrugged. Your house? Wrong, he said promptly, hesitating. Becky, he said, the smile fading from his lips. I put a lot of years into teaching her the ways of Christ, and I would be very displeased if someone came along and corrupted her and drew her away from Christ. Can you see what I'm saying? Justin nodded. I guess I never thought of it like that. The reason I'm so strict with you, Justin, is because you are not a true Christian. Yes, you've been coming to church. I commend you on that. But I can tell when a person is not saved by the blood of Christ. If you were, then maybe things would be different. In my personal belief, I think it is wrong for a young Christian woman such as Becky to be with someone who is not an ambassador for Christ. The head of the household should be the spiritual leader. How can you be a spiritual leader if you're lost? He let the question resonate a bit before continuing. It's going to be a very tough road ahead if you don't have God in your life, Justin. But, he said, shrugging, like I said, we gave Becky the opportunity to date. I think it would be very unfair for her mother and I to tell her who she can date. And since she's chosen you, we're willing to give you a chance. But you have to give us a chance as well. I think that's more than fair, said Justin. And on that note, I have decided to allow Becky to start going places with you. He held up his finger. But only on one condition. Wherever it is that you decided to go, Paul will be tagging along. Progression is a wonderful thing. You should be grateful. So how do you feel about that? Progression is a good thing, Justin agreed. Although it still kind of sucks, we'll just have to make the best of it. Splendid, said Sam, standing up. And oh, one more thing. If I ever hear of you having sex with my daughter, he trailed off as if he didn't know how to continue. I'll shoot you, he finished sincerely. You can certainly understand that, can't you? Justin smiled. Point taken, he said, standing and shaking Sam's hand. Point very well taken. Later that night, Justin and Becky stood in the driveway holding each other. Are you going to tell me what you and Dad talked about today? She asked. Justin shook his head. I think you already know what he said. Becky smiled, saying nothing. You think your parents will let me take you to the movies tomorrow night? Becky shrugged. On my 18th birthday? Depends. What are we going to see? What difference does it make? Because it'll have to be something Paul will like too. Oh, said Justin, so you were eavesdropping. Becky displayed her hands in a what did you expect kind of way. Doesn't matter to me, he said. As long as you're there beside me, I don't care who else is with us. Your mom and dad can come too for all I care. Becky craned her neck to kiss him, then hugged him tightly. She was falling in love with this guy. And if he could just fall in love with Christ as well, he'd be the perfect man. She tilted her head up as Justin pressed his lips against hers, sliding his tongue past her teeth. Then came his familiar hand between her legs. You do know my dad is just up the hill praying, don't you? Said Becky. Well, if he's praying correctly, he shouldn't be concerned with what we're doing down here, he said. You're so bad. Besides, said Justin, he doesn't scare me. That lone statement truly frightened Becky because her father scared everyone. You better go before he shoots you. Justin climbed into his car, revved the engine, then drove away. Becky's insides fluttered. Even though this was her first boyfriend, she had to admit he was fun and exciting. She couldn't wait until their movie date tomorrow. Maybe she would surprise him and put her hand down his pants. When her brother wasn't looking, of course. Maybe. The next day, Becky sat at her bedroom window and watched Justin pull into the driveway. It seemed he had just washed and waxed his beautiful car because it was shining like a new toy. She couldn't wait to ride in it. She was going to look so cool. She strolled out of the house clad in tight jeans and a white t-shirt with black lettering that proclaimed her love for Jesus. She saw Justin roll his eyes, but she dismissed it. At that time, Paul and Ruth came idling out of the house bickering. I don't want to go, Paul roared. Ruth slapped him on the butt. Yes, you are. Your father says you're going and that's that. She looked up and waved wholeheartedly at Justin. Becky stole a glance at Justin, whose eyes were at the ceiling of the car, his head shaking slightly. Paul climbed to the back seat, then she plopped down into the passenger seat, patting Justin's leg. Don't worry, it'll be fine. Ruth knelt down at Becky's window and smiled wickedly at Justin. Now, Paul, she said, her voice accusing, your job is to make sure these two don't do anything they're not supposed to. Yeah, whatever, said Paul. Becky spotted her father standing in the doorway, looking on. Ruth shifted her watchful eyes back toward Justin. This is just until Sam and I can trust you, Justin. This is nothing against you. Justin raised his eyebrows, then gave a slight nod. I hope this doesn't sink your spirits about dating our daughter, she said, a trace of delight in her voice. Justin leaned toward her, putting his hand on Becky's lap, close to her crotch. Not at all, Ruth. In fact, we're thrilled to have Paul along. Ruth frowned. Becky could see from Justin's beaming face that he took instant gratification from it. Now you kids be good, said Ruth, and wear your seatbelts. She shook her finger at Justin. No speeding with my babies in the car. I wouldn't dream of it, Justin said sarcastically. I still don't want to go, said Paul, perturbed, buckling his seatbelt. Oh, I think you'll have fun, Paul, said Ruth, her eyes focusing on Justin. Now, I know you won't take my babies to see trash, will you, Justin? Justin shook his head. Of course not. All right then, said Ruth. Now, I done called the cinema, and they told me that all their 7 o'clock movies will be over no later than 9. Oh, my God, Mom, cried Becky, hiding her face in embarrassment. Ruth pointed her finger at Becky. Now, Becky, you know better than to use the good Lord's name in vain. She shifted her gaze back to Justin. It takes precisely 30 minutes to get from here to there during the speed limit. So I expect you back here no later than 9:45. Got it? Justin held up his thumb and smiled sarcastically. He put the car into gear. Bye, Paul, Ruth said, waving. I love you, baby. Becky's face flared red as they pulled away. I'm so sorry about that, she said. If you decide to dump me, I'll understand. Justin waved her off. Don't be ridiculous. I wouldn't dump you because of them. I love you, not them. There isn't anyone who can stop me from loving you. Oh, man, said Paul. Someone get me out of here. I'm going to puke. Becky's heart fluttered. That was the first time Justin had ever said that he loved her. She grasped him, laying her head on his shoulder, tucking her hand into the waistband of his jeans as they made their way down the road. I've never been here before, Becky said as they pulled into the cinema's large parking lot. What are we watching? Justin asked, looking up at the listings. I don't know what any of them are, said Becky. Justin made a quick pass over the advertisements. How about The Last House on the Left? What's it about? Becky asked. Don't worry about it, said Justin. We're here to have fun. Hey, Paul chimed up. It's rated R. We're not allowed to watch rated R stuff. He seemed genuinely worried about it. Don't fret over it, Paul, Justin assured him. You'll like it, trust me. He gave Becky an unctuous wink and smile, leading her and Paul past the ticket booth and into the dark theater. Oh, crap, said Becky. I left my phone at home. That's swell, said Justin, his smile growing wider. You're not supposed to have phones in here anyway. Once the three of them emerged from the side exit door 2 hours later, Becky and Paul exclaimed their intense dislike for the film. Gee, I thought it was awesome, said Justin, beaming. You would, Becky exclaimed, resentment plastered over her face. That was probably the stupidest movie I've ever seen, she said. Yeah, Paul agreed. It was dumb. I hated it. You two wouldn't know a good movie if God himself sat you in front of one, Justin spat. I know you wouldn't pick that one, Paul spat back. Why don't you just shut up, you little shit? Paul puffed his small chest out. Why don't you make me? Justin laughed. Just take us home, please, Becky ordered, moving several steps ahead of Justin. She should have known better. How could she have been so blind? Why didn't she just listen to her parents? Didn't they always know what was best for her? How could she have let Justin stick his finger inside her during the movie? She had committed all types of sins inside that movie house. She felt so dirty and shameful. It wasn't like before. This time she felt she was the subject of something evil, threatening. Maybe it was just the atmosphere of the bad movie. Still, there was a lot of praying ahead of her tonight, and perhaps she knew that once she was home, she would never see Justin again. Her father was right. They were just too different. From the moment each of them piled into the car and drove away to the moment Justin missed the exit that took him to Becky's neck of the woods, no one said a word. You missed the exit, Becky said irritably. A wicked grin formed over Justin's mouth. I know. I did it on purpose. Why? Because I want to show you something first, he said. I just want to go home, she said. Whatever it is, I don't want to see it, because I don't care. Oh, but I think you will, said Justin, pressing the gas pedal harder. "My mom and dad are going to be mad at you," said Becky, hoping to instill some kind of fear in him, "for making me watch a stupid movie and for being late." "I don't give a flying fuck what they are," Justin rasped, his collectedness and composure sailing completely out the window. Paul clapped his hands to his ears. "I'm telling my dad you said the F word." Justin leaned into the back seat, leering at Paul. "That's just fucking great. But do you really think I fucking care, you little fucking twerp?" Becky grabbed hold of Justin's arm, forcing him back. And right then she felt his skin. It was burning, hot to the touch. She looked into his raging eyes and was genuinely frightened. The anger she once felt had totally disappeared and was replaced with mortal fear. "Get your nasty hands off me," Justin sneered at her. Becky started to cry. She couldn't hold it back. "Just take us home, okay?" She couldn't wait to get home, to confide in her father, to fall into his loving, protective arms, to ask his forgiveness, and to ask Jesus for forgiveness. Justin said nothing as he pulled into a lonely, darkened park just a couple miles west of town. "Why are we here?" Becky asked, her voice shaky. Paul was now sobbing, pleading to his sister to go home. "We'll be there soon," she told him, wondering if that was the truth. Justin pulled the car to a stop. He got out and popped the trunk, burying himself into its confines. Becky's apprehension was so great she didn't think she could keep herself from shaking. Why did they have to come way out here in a deserted park, in the dark, to see something Justin had in the trunk? Paul scampered out of the car via the driver's side. "Paul," Becky called out, "get back in the car!" "I want him to take me back to Mom," Paul shouted, tears squirting from his eyes. Suddenly there was a loud pop. Becky twisted around in her seat and caught a glimpse of Paul's body fall limply to the pavement. In the next instant, she saw Justin holding a pistol. She screamed and clambered across the console to the driver's side. She looked at the ignition, hoping the keys were still there, but they were gone. It isn't like you can drive a standard shift anyway. That was true, but she was always taught that with God's help, anything was possible. And speaking of God, why was he allowing this to happen to her, and especially to Paul? Before an answer came, Justin whisked around the car, diving through the open passenger window, attacking Becky. Becky struggled against Justin's powerful body. She tried to kick, but he was too strong. She screamed again, but this time Justin stuffed a wet sponge into her mouth. "Eat it, bitch," came Justin's rapid voice. "Swallow like you swallow the seed of your father." Though Becky could no longer scream, she struggled, moving her limbs any way she could, but Justin's strength was there to render her helpless. "If you don't stop," Justin whispered in her ear, "I'm going to fucking kill you, just like I killed your precious little brother." He reached outside the door, grabbed the pistol, and held it to her head. Suddenly, Becky surrendered her struggles. She became acutely aware that she wasn't getting away, that she was subjected to whatever evil intention Justin wanted. Tears were thick in her eyes as that realization sunk in. She tried to subside her body's constant trembling, but it wouldn't stop. "That's good," Justin whispered. "That's real good." He slid his tongue up and down her neck. "You like that? You do, don't you?" "Yeah, I know you do." Becky found it hard to swallow. Her body quivered so bad she thought she was going to have a heart attack. "Now I'm going to stand up, and you're going to take your clothes off, and you're going to do it slowly and quietly," he stressed. Becky spilled more tears. "I just want to go home." She emphasized the word home as if it were thousands of miles away. To her, it probably seemed that far. "You'll get to go home," Justin assured her, "after we're done here. I promise. If you do exactly as I say." He stood up, directing his gun at her. "Now strip." Reluctantly, Becky began to undress. When she was down to her panties and bra, she suddenly stopped and looked pleadingly into Justin's deranged eyes. "What's wrong?" "Please," she begged, "don't make me do this." Justin tightened his grip on the pistol. "I said strip. It isn't like I've never seen a set of tits on a pussy before." Becky removed the last two items of her clothing and laid naked before him in the middle of a dark parking lot underneath the dull glow of a street lamp. Justin unzipped his pants and moved toward her. "Open your legs." Becky closed her eyes when she saw him unzip his pants. She obliged, unwillingly, as silent tears streamed down her face. What exactly were her options? Once again, the question of God. was allowing this to happen to her popped into her head. There were no answers, at least no sensible answers. Once Justin was inside her, he put the gun back on top of the car. A long 5 minutes later, he came, spurting his seed over her body like a watering pot. He climbed off her, then retrieved his pistol. Becky didn't move. She laid in the seat in utter despair. There was a sanctimonious grin painted on Justin's face. Your pitiful God couldn't save you this time, could he? Becky said nothing as Justin broke off into absurd laughter. He wheeled around the car, then plopped down in the driver's seat. He started the car. You try to run, I shoot you, he said as he put the car into reverse. The car moved backward, bumping over Paul's body. Shit, Justin exclaimed, throwing the car back into first gear. The car ran over Paul a second time. Just got to make sure, he said, pulling out of the lot. Becky sobbed, hearing the crunch of her brother's bones beneath the tires. That sound would haunt her for the rest of her days. Oh, and by the way, said Justin, happy birthday. Becky curled into a ball against the door, shuddering, crying silent tears. Relax, said the monster beside her. I'm taking you home now. That's what you wanted, ain't it? He waited a long moment before saying, My goodness, my sweet, sweet plan is so near completion. It gives me chills just thinking about it. All we need now is a little help from your dear old daddy. His plan? Becky wondered. What could he possibly be talking about? Please don't kill me, she said. Nothing to worry about, my dear, said Justin, smiling. I told you, I'm taking you home, alive. You're going to get to see your parents again. He glanced over at her. I know what you're thinking, and I want you to know that everything is going to work out perfectly. You just have to have faith. You still have faith, don't you? Becky didn't know what to believe anymore. She just wanted this nightmare to end. 15 endless minutes later, she felt the car veer sharply to the right and began the familiar upward climb toward her house. She rose anxiously in her seat, hoping she was almost home. Suddenly her house appeared just above the dash. In a move of desperation, fearing Justin would drive past it, she opened the door and dropped out into the muddy ditch. Briars jerked her skin open as she tumbled, pain exploding in her right elbow and knees. Justin laughed, slamming on the brakes. Becky rose to all fours, frantically searching the premises. She crawled forward, sloshing through the mud, screaming for her parents. Justin let up on the brake, allowing the car to coast alongside Becky as she scrambled toward her house. Run, he bellowed. Run to your God-fearing, pig-headed parents. Run like the wind, he laughed heartily. Suddenly Ruth and Sam came jostling out their front door. Sam was carrying a shotgun. Justin laughed again as he swerved the car in an attempt to trap Becky between the car and the ditch, but she was unable to maneuver around the vehicle, dashing toward her parents, her body covered in mud. She screamed indecipherable words as she finally embraced her father, positioning herself behind him. Justin stepped out of his car and leaned against it, crossing his arms over his chest, depicting the coolness of a James Dean photo. Sam and Ruth drilled their daughter fretfully about her hysterical condition and the whereabouts of Paul. Becky's eyes grew wide, her face purple from lack of oxygen to her brain. She felt that she was going to pass out, but willed herself to remain conscious until she was able to tell her parents what had happened. I demand to know what's going on here, Sam shouted, looking at Justin, then around the vicinity. And I demand to know where Paul is right this instant. Becky's breathing was laborious. She tried to catch it and talk at the same time. She began. She tried again, tears shooting down her face. He's dead, she finally blurted. He's dead, Mom. Justin killed him. Ruth shot Justin a deathful glare as tears began to fill her eyes. What's she talking about, Justin? Where's little Polly? Where's my baby? Justin shook his head, now crossing his feet. I don't know what the hell she's babbling about, he said coolly. I think she's delusional. As Becky's mind focused in and out of reality, she heard her father asking again about the whereabouts of her brother. She burst into another fit of tears. I told you, she cried. He's dead. Why can't you get that through your fucking heads? She was screaming now. She pointed toward Justin. He fucking shot him! Ruth cradled her daughter to her bosom. Sam looked dauntingly toward Justin. Please, said Sam, for the love of God. God has no love, Justin cut him off. Surely you see that now. Please tell me this isn't true, said Sam. He was almost pleading, near his own breakdown of tears. Justin shook his head. Becky! She turned her sodden eyes toward him. Why don't you tell him what I did to you? His grin was malicious, savvy. Becky ripped her gaze away from him, crying into her mother's shoulder. The thought of it made her furious. She could still feel him inside her, his vile seed leaking from her. What did he do, Becky? Ruth prodded. Becky sobbed heavily. Then, he raped me, she bellowed. What? Sam yelled, wide-eyed and furious. He leered at Justin, then popped his shotgun up on his shoulder, inching forward. Justin's grin broadened. You know, I figured it was about time she had a real cock in that sweet pussy of hers. Not just yours, Dad. Ruth fumed, peering malevolently at the monstrosity before her. Sam pumped the slide of the shotgun. You better shut your mouth right now, boy, before I pull this trigger and make your skull explode. Justin offered a short bout of joyous applause. Yippee! He exclaimed, leaning forward, his expression suddenly sour. Then what the fuck are you waiting for? He leaned over and pointed to the top of his head. Shoot me right here, you self-righteous prick. Sweat dripped from Sam's forehead, despite the cool breeze pushing in from the northwest. He grimaced, staring hard into Justin's eyes. You better believe that if I wasn't a soldier for God, I would have pulled this trigger a long time ago. That is such horseshit, Justin yelled, turning his palms up. What's God got to do with any of this fucking shit? Fuck God, he spat. He straightened, then smiled. When are you going to realize that God isn't anything but an imaginary being put in the sky by self-righteous pricks just like you thousands of years ago just to make people behave? His eyes were wide and fiery. Are you fucking serious? Sam's hold on the gun faltered a bit. It shook as it grew heavy in his arms. God is real, he said. How do you know, Samuel? Justin asked. Have you seen him? I've felt him, Sam countered. Justin wrinkled his brows, then clapped his hands. Oh, bravo, Sam, bravo. If God is real, then how come when I hold my middle finger up in the air and say, fuck you, God, you ain't worth the sweat on my hairy nutsack? He doesn't strike me dead. Sam swallowed thickly. He doesn't work like that. He doesn't work like that because he's not real, Sam. He snapped his fingers repeatedly. When are you going to wake up and smell reality? Sam slowly shook his head. No, he said. You're some kind of devil and I won't let you tempt me. He raised the gun. Get behind me, Satan. Get behind me. Justin's wicked smile broadened unnaturally. You mean to tell me that after you told me you'd shoot me, if I ever had sexual relations with your only daughter, the one you molded since birth in the ways of that faggot Jesus Christ, that now all of a sudden you can't do it? Really? I raped her, Sam, and I killed your only son. Come on, get real. I deserve to be punished. I violated her body with my sick, perverted dick. And just what the fuck are you going to do about it? You will be judged on Judgment Day, Sam wept. I killed your son and raped your daughter, who, by the way, could now be carrying my child, because I came deep in that shit. And all you can say is, you will be judged on Judgment Day? Sam tried to hold the gun steady. It makes no sense, said Justin, turning and lifting up on the door handle of his car. Let's make believe God is real, and you shoot me. I'll be willing to bet that he'll probably forgive you for killing such a wretch like me. What do you think? Ruth and Becky were sobbing heavily behind Sam, who had tears cascading down his own cheeks. If I go now, said Justin, I'm just going to find someone else to take advantage of. He paused and took a step forward. The way I figure it, you're just as evil as I am for letting me go. And to think you could have ended it all right here, right this second. Sam took a few steps toward Justin. The door to the car swung wide on its hinges. Justin stooped to climb in. And then Becky wailed, Shoot him, Daddy! For the love of God, just shoot him! Sam was sobbing, pleading for the Almighty God to guide him as the tiny muscle in his trigger finger contracted, igniting the gun. A booming gunshot rang out into the night. Becky put her hands to her mouth to stifle the horrid scream that escaped it. Her eyes flooded with water as they absorbed everything before her. She watched Justin's body lurch backward against his pretty car as an explosion of red erupted from the center of his chest. She glanced over at her father, then at the gun in his shaking hands. He dropped it, then fell to his knees. Ruth and Becky rushed over to him, wrapping their arms around him. They told him how much they loved him and that together, with God, they would somehow get through these terrible times. They huddled together right there in the grass, on their knees, praying aloud for a full 5 minutes. And then a low guttural moan crept from Justin's still body. "Oh my God," Becky uttered, tears filling her eyes once again. "Go call the police," said Sam. "Call them now." Ruth scrambled into the house, slamming the door behind her. But Becky remained with her father, too shocked to move. Slam slowly picked up the shotgun, worked its slide, and aimed it at Justin's lifeless form. "Get back," he said to his daughter. The moan came again, sounding as if Justin was coming out of a deep sleep. And then all of a sudden, a dark cloud rose up from the body. A pair of white specks, like glittering diamonds, emitted from the dark shape, fixing its gaze on a trembling Sam. "What?" Sam began. "You have violated God's trust," the entity croaked, "and for that you must be condemned." "My family," Sam squeaked. "You have committed murder," said the voice, "the ultimate deed of evil." Sam stood on his knees, mesmerized at this dark shape before him. "You tricked me," he said, cowering, tears rolling down his face. "God has tested you, and like all others before you, throughout the course of time, you have failed. No. You were to overcome the adversity that was presented before you," said the voice. "Now you are indebted to spend eternity with us in the lake of fire." "No," said Sam, backing up. "No! I am a man of God. I'm his warrior, his servant. You can't force me away from him. I will repent, and I will be forgiven." Becky backpedaled, bumping against the house. The demon laughed. "It is too late to repent." The entity shot an ear-splitting roar that left Becky's ears ringing. Sam unloaded the remaining rounds of his shotgun at the rising form as it came at him in a whirlwind of black smoke. Suddenly Sam stood stock still, a wild expression tattooed onto his distilled face. He dropped the gun and clutched at his chest. Becky watched in absolute horror and dismay, realizing the demon was inside her father, cutting away at his life. She cried out to him, reaching for him, but a force she couldn't explain kept her feet rooted in place. Sam staggered to the middle of the road, fell, and died of a heart attack just as a police car was pulling up. Without Sam's spiritual guidance, Ruth and Becky would backslide into the traps of deviltry and would later join Sam and hundreds of millions of others in the very large lake of fire. A church bell chimed throughout the distant hills of a landscape nearly 2,000 miles from the spot Sam was provoked by one of Satan's demons. Service had ended and the people milled around, talking, visiting, and gossiping. The preacher stepped down from the rostrum and walked to the center of the aisle where his wife and son were chatting. The son motioned over a new friend he had met. "I want you to meet my new friend," he told his parents. "Hello, young lady," said the preacher. "What brings you to our humble church?" "I've recently been saved," she said, "and I was hungry for someone to preach the glorious word to me." The preacher beamed. "Amen, sister," he said, shaking the young woman's hand. "We need more young ladies like you around here, testifying on how good our God is. Welcome to our church." "Thank you." "Oh," said the preacher's wife, tapping the girl on the hand, "I don't believe we caught your name, dear." "Justine," she replied, her clean, straight teeth gleaming. "Just call me Justine." The end.